The Sweet Bloom Bakery's windows were gently tapped by the morning drizzle in Portland, creating a lovely rhythm that accompanied the sound of the coffee maker preparing its first batch of the day. Warm aromas of roasted coffee and freshly squeezed lemon cupcakes permeated the air, while the earthy perfume of rain-soaked streets from the Pearl District wafted in from outside. Under the warm light of the string lights hanging from the ceiling, I repositioned the final tray of pastries in the glass, showcased their golden tops shimmering. Locals would have shuffled in for their regular orders. The jingle of the doors, a constant heartbeat of the neighborhood, on what was intended to be a typical Monday morning in early June. Still, every now and again, seemingly mundane mornings set the setting for life-altering events. Amidst the soft morning hum of customers, my phone rang on the counter as I was affixing a pink ribbon to a box of cupcakes that Mrs. Carter had ordered for her book club. I looked at the computer, anticipating a notification regarding Avery's school pickup. I had committed to bringing her favorite blueberry muffin for her field trip today. Rather, it was my husband Ethan who sent the SMS. Like a swish of rain on a hot day, the words struck me hard. "I am departing from you. Moving to Los Angeles is in our future, Sam and I. My apologies, honey. Our joint account is now empty. Hope everything works out." As I completed the bow, the ribbon curled precisely despite the mayhem taking place inside of me. My heart pounded a heavy weight, pressing down on my chest, yet my hands remained still. For a few seconds, everything appeared to spin out of control, as the normal cadence of the bakery cups clinking muted laughing. The hiss of the espresso machine dwindled into an otherworldly buzz. I was buried in flour and icing when my 14 years of marriage were reduced to a casual text message, saying, "Here's your usual order, Mrs. Carter." I maintained a steady voice that belied the impending tempest within. As the light from the bakery warmed my face, I gave her the box. "Your book club is sure to have some interesting discussions planned." Ignoring the bomb that had just gone off in my life, she returned my grin with wire-rimmed spectacles that crinkled around her sweet eyes. "Yes, we do, in fact." An inspiring tale of perseverance in the face of hardship is what we'll be exploring this week. It is interesting how fiction may reflect real life at times, isn't it? Even though her remarks seemed to foretell something, I did little more than nod my mouth, somewhat averted. She should have known. Standing alone behind the desk, I stared at Ethan's message, the screen radiating with his brutality as she departed the door, gently jingling behind her. No justification, ignoring the subject. All it took was a digital farewell that broke our hearts like a broken record in a business deal. The phrase, "Sam Los Angeles cleaned out our joint account, good luck," stuck with me when I read it again. Sam Harper, his sales assistant of 22 years, the one who had overreacted to his jokes at the corporate picnic last year. The flaws should have been obvious to me at that point, but I was too preoccupied with baking to do so. A weird calmness, a quiet I hadn't anticipated, replaced the first shock as it faded. Not a tear escaped my eye. A scream eluded me. Rather, I retrieved a manila envelope that I had prepared weeks earlier and made my way to my cozy office, located behind the bakery, where the aroma of sugar and yeast accompanied me like a faithful companion. Jenna, my assistant, was nearby, wiping down a table when I put it on the counter and called out to her. I casually asked her to replenish the coffee station. "If Ethan stops by, give him this," I replied. With a little frown on her forehead, Jenna nodded, but she remained silent. I had been practicing for this moment for longer than I wanted to admit. but she had seen me manage rush-hour pandemonium with the same calm strength that I was displaying now. My years of experience as a freelance accountant have given me a natural talent for keeping accurate financial records, which I've used successfully in my bakery and in my personal life. Also, I couldn't turn a blind eye to the numbers that Ethan had left behind. My years of experience as a freelance accountant have given me a natural talent for keeping accurate financial records, which I've used successfully in my bakery and in my personal life. Also, I couldn't turn a blind eye to the numbers that Ethan had left behind. I prevented the breakdown of our family while he spent his midlife crisis going on team-building retreats in the Columbia River Gorge, chasing after short-lived ambitions of climbing the corporate ladder and enduring 3 fruitless sales campaigns. When he spent all of his funds on a fancy motorcycle, which ruined our budget in a matter of months, I made sure that we were both financially stable. I put in long hours inspecting tiny companies and ensuring sure Avery's school fees were paid, all while Ethan rebranded himself with a pair of pricey shoes and slim-fit pants. A rebranding that was as transient as a cherry blossom in Portland, lovely for a moment, then gone. A secret ambition of mine has always been to launch an accounting business that assists female entrepreneurs, or to grow Sweet Bloom into a franchise. I used to persuade myself that I'd get Avery established into school after I was kneading dough at 5 a.m. while looking out the bakery window at a soft gray Portland skyline and the glittering Willamette River in the distance. Following Ethan's advancement, promotions, however, were as uncommon with Ethan as a clear February day. I first became aware of problems with our shared finances 5 months ago. Not a big deal, but the little charges didn't amount to much. A $500 plane ticket to Hollywood and back. Spend $1,800 on a weekend at a charming Bend hotel. An unidentified necklace costing $200 that I bought from a jewelry store. I first assumed it was some kind of technical malfunction at the bank. I, however, am not a lady who allows numerical details to lapse. For years, I've diligently checked customers' financial statements for mistakes. I was not going to turn a blind eye to this. I proceeded to go farther stealthily and meticulously, as if I were conducting a tax audit for a client. The Portland rain was a constant patter on the glass when I logged into our account late at night, with the only sound being the gentle hum of the refrigerator in the bakery kitchen. Staying glued to the keyboard of my laptop, I tracked out the expenditures and verified them by comparing them to our credit card bills. I discovered treachery as frigid as the Willamette River in January. Ethan had been secretly depositing funds into an account for more than a year. He paid Sadie a non-refundable $40,000 deposit on an apartment in Los Angeles, took her to rooftop dinners in the Pearl District, and even purchased her the jewelry. During this time, they insisted that we cut back so that Avery would have a better future. As we sat at our Laurelhurst kitchen table, last month with Avery's drawings pinned to the fridge behind us, he had stated, "We can't afford that new mixer for the bakery right now, Lily," in a tight voice. I had given him my faith and nodded while he sent money to his mistress. Afterwards, I located the receipt. The item fell out of Ethan's jacket pocket one night as I was putting it away. He had come home late, claiming to have had a client dinner. It was a receipt for 2 from a fancy restaurant in downtown Portland, dated the same night he had claimed to have been working late. Neither the figures nor his narrative made sense. I transferred the funds from Sweet Bloom's earnings into an individual account I had set up at a different bank that very night. I smiled and agreed with Ethan a week later when he proposed merging our accounts to streamline things. At the same time, I moved most of our money to my new account. He had just depleted our joint account, which had around 2 months' worth of deposits, just enough to pay our usual costs. The remainder, along with meticulous documentation of each dubious transaction he had executed in the previous 12 months, was secure. Each page was a testimony to his dishonesty and a formula for his destruction. I had printed them off and put them in a binder. The 22-year-old Sadie, whose infectious laugh got under my skin last year, was introduced to me at our corporate picnic. She had lingered close to Ethan, caressing his arm as she laughed at his awful jokes, her eyes shining as if she had found a priceless gem. I ignored the knot in my gut that had formed as I observed her. It had also gone unnoticed by Ethan. "She's just friendly Lily," he had said, his new Ray-Bans glistening in the sun as he sipped a craft beer. Friendly. I see. Even though I knew it should have happened then, I refused to believe it. Not until there was indisputable proof. Even though he had expressed privacy concerns recently, I discovered further evidence on his phone one night when he left it on the kitchen counter. A text message from Sadie with the passcode still intact. Our new life in Los Angeles is something I'm looking forward to, really. My chest constricted as a chilling burden settled in. At last we will be liberated. With a calm hand and a beating heart, I browsed through their texts. Future preparations for their united existence. Once Avery's school year finished, he would handle things as promised. He chose to break the news of our breakup immediately following her last day, anticipating that I would be preoccupied with my bakery duties to respond. "She'll be too exhausted to engage in combat," he had penned. "Absolutely," Sadie said. I stood there, my world spinning on its axis, listening to the rain tap on the kitchen window and smelling cinnamon buns baking in the oven. We'll be sipping cocktails in Hollywood while she's still trying to make sense of what happened. All 14 years of it, staying up late to bake, supporting Avery at soccer games, and being there for Ethan when he failed, were a lie. Still, I managed to remain unbroken. Before locking his phone and placing it back where I found it, I grabbed screenshots and sent them to myself via email. A few while later, Ethan whimpered his way downstairs, completely bewildered. As he reached for a glass of water, he said, "The air smells incredible." A half smile was all I could muster. No problem. What Ethan failed to understand was that I am an expert at maintaining financial and personal balance sheets. Every late-night client meeting, every transaction, and every falsehood were meticulously documented. I retained the services of private investigator Tara Reynolds, a perceptive woman who focused on household matters. With the aroma of espresso and rain filling the air and the vibrant Pearl District all around us, we gathered in a cafe next to the bakery. An official-looking woman with sympathetic eyes gave me a hefty folder. Images of Ethan and Sadie smiling and holding hands on California's Venice Beach. Expense reports from their weekend getaway to San Francisco, where they drank wine by the Bayside in a charming boutique inn. A Los Angeles apartment lease document signed by both parties. Tara passed the file across the table with a steady hand and a soft voice. "My apologies, Mrs. Monroe." With firm hands, I nodded and slipped the file into my backpack, acknowledging that it wasn't easy to view. "I am grateful," I murmured. It wasn't like I was crumbling. I was constructing evidence. As I reflected about our prenuptial agreement, I couldn't help but think of the young salesman Ethan. Was back then paranoid about giving up half of his future earnings in the event that our marriage didn't work out. That was 14 years ago. I signed it without thinking twice, because I loved him and thought we could make it. He would be destroyed by that paper. The fine print had an adultery provision that threatened severe financial consequences in the event that any of us betrayed the other. Ethan was sound asleep upstairs, oblivious to the reckoning I was contemplating. As I read it late at night, the bakery Empty the Rain, a constant hum outside. It was a perfect clause. At my attorney Henry Caldwell's downtown Portland office, the next morning I met with him while the Willamette River glistened outside the window. "It's ironclad," Henry said with a smile while he was sipping his coffee. "Good," I murmured, nodding as I stirred my coffee, a calm determination washing over me. "With the evidence, you've got those transactions, the messages, the photos he'll lose, the house, the joint assets, everything. It's time to go ahead." In the months that followed, I worked covertly to get ready. All the while, Ethan plotted his daring escape. Every single transfer communication and lie was meticulously recorded. With meticulous planning, I rescheduled my meeting with Henry to file the divorce papers. Ethan would want to avoid upsetting Avery, or so he would tell himself, so I expected him to hold off until after Avery's school year to reveal his decision. I had already submitted the paperwork that morning prior to his text message at the bakery. He had no idea. He did not have access to them just yet, but they were waiting in the court records, prepared to strike at the appropriate moment. At all times, I remained one step ahead. I had been bracing myself for this treachery for far longer than Ethan had anticipated, despite his belief that his communication had taken me by surprise. I got in my car and headed to our Laurelhurst house, a charming bungalow we had purchased about a decade earlier when we were still partners, or so I had believed. The house that Ethan had previously assured Sadie of, as revealed by those unseen phone texts. I pulled into the driveway, where the soft mist of rain and the ever-familiar aroma of damp grass and cedar greeted me. On the inside, nothing changed. We refinished the hardwood flooring following Avery's first birthday celebration, when her juice had spilled all over the place. Her first finger painting, her graduation from kindergarten, and her soccer trophy from last year are all displayed on the gallery wall. We used to sit at the kitchen counter and bake cookies with her giggling as flour got in our nostrils and daydreaming about her future. Ethan was also there. But now things were different. The home seemed devoid of life, a mere vestige of its former self. With the familiar sound of the stairs' slight creak, I made my way upstairs to our bedroom. As the ever-supportive wife, I pried open the closet and ran my fingertips over the aprons I'd worn to innumerable baking events. Seated in the corner behind them were his bags, packed, prepared to leave tomorrow, immediately following his great reveal. A sharp chuckle slipped out of my mouth as I fixed my gaze on them. His packing has always been an obsession of his. He would meticulously fold his shirts and roll his socks into tidy little balls. Yet he was negligent on the matters that were of utmost importance. Lacking sight. Nora, Ethan's sister, and someone I'd always considered more of a friend than her brother and other acquaintances from the bakery, texted me, making my pocket hum with messages. A note from Avery's school made my chest clench, so I took it out. I swiftly confirmed the end-of-year party by typing back a message, my fingers remaining steady despite the pain in my heart. For months I had kept Avery in the dark so as not to ruin her academic year. Despite Ethan's efforts to funnel funds to Sadie, she had worked incredibly hard, juggling soccer practice and her math tutoring. I knew Avery would understand in due time, but I still worried she would be disappointed that I hadn't told her. She inherited my meticulous nature and keen eye for detail, along with her father's magnetic personality, which enabled her to truly shine. I refused to allow Ethan's treachery to diminish that brilliance. At this time, no. Perched on the foot of our bed, I felt the gentle touch of the quilt my mom had sewn for our wedding day. The intricate stitching on the blanket represented a life I believed I had known. I reflected on the good old days of our relationship when Ethan would surprise me with coffee trips to Stumptown, and we would go hiking in Forest Park, laughing as we slid down the muddy paths. We had endured an immense amount. Our money were depleted by 3 sales initiatives that failed. During the difficult toddler years when Avery would awaken in pain from her ears, Ethan would sing lullabies to her in a quiet, kind voice. Both of us had been devastated by a miscarriage before Avery, but we had supported one another through our sadness. When did he transform? On the other hand, had I been oblivious to his egotism and dishonesty because I was too busy baking? To dispel the recollections, I shook my head. For the moment, they were irrelevant. The strategy I had put into action was what was important. The envelope I'd dropped off at the bakery wasn't inert. A beacon of hope, a flare, a path out of the tempest. Standing up, I straightened my apron and made my way downstairs, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation. Standing up, I straightened my apron and made my way downstairs, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation. After 4 hours, Ethan's automobile sped into our Laurelhurst driveway, its tires slipping on the wet pavement, drowning out the nighttime buzz of Portland. Air laden with the aroma of damp cedar and a subtle hint of gasoline rushed in as the front door swung wide, sending a surge of moist air hurtling in. "Hi, Lily." The sound of his yelling reverberated through the home, conveying a combination of anger and fear. "Dude, where are you?" With my laptop open on the counter and a spreadsheet of Ethan's transactions flashing on the screen, I was in the kitchen preparing a plate of chocolate chip cookies for Avery's after-school snack. I gently clicked it shut as he barged in his face, red with anger, clutching the ripped edges of the manila envelope I'd left at the bakery. "What does this even signify?" As his temper flared, he slammed the documents onto the counter and made an angry demand. "Are you looking for the divorce paperwork included in Avery's final day of classes? Do you not understand?" I raised my eyes to meet his, maintaining an air of composure, and spoke as if I were giving a client a recipe. "It seemed to fit in well with your timing." I added my words, controlled and thoughtful. "You desired a new beginning. Am I assisting you in obtaining one? I can't believe this." He raised his voice to a shout, but I abruptly silenced him. I was perfectly within my rights. You were well within your rights to select Sadie. Everybody has to make a decision, Ethan. The sharp ring of his pocket phone broke the silence, and I knew the name even without looking at the screen. He gave it a cursory look before ignoring it, but I recognized the face. Of course, Sadie was probably thinking why he wasn't at the airport where they were supposed to board the plane to Los Angeles. He made an effort to change tactics, adopting a pompous and condescending tone. "That prenup, it's ancient history," he replied, his arms crossed and a hint of self-assurance shining through his gaze. "No lawyer will uphold it after all these years." I couldn't help but break a little smile, the type that made his swagger stumble, revealing a subtle weakness in his defenses. In fact, it holds true even now. According to Section 14, the adultery provision remains in effect for as long as the marriage continues. They ought to have informed you that your lawyer— You didn't employ one, though. Oh, I see. His once confident expression became arrogant as a newfound terror set in, and he dropped his hands to his sides. Now, because he insisted on a prenup to safeguard himself, he would no longer have any claim to my bakery, the property, or any of our shared assets. He had just made the biggest financial error of his life with his spectacular departure. "You can't do this to me," he cried out, his voice cracking as he slumped into a chair, his hands shaking and the package tumbling to the floor. While observing him with a tilt of my head, I said, "We built this life together." My tone was cold and disconnected. Then you decided to set it ablaze. It was just different from what he had anticipated. His phone beeped once again, this time with greater intensity, and the screen lit up to indicate another call. As he scowled at it, his shoulders drooped even more. The issue I questioned, my voice somewhat amused, as I returned the package to its place on the counter. His fingers twitched across the screen as he said, "Our flight, it's been canceled." He stared at the phone in shock. "The hotel in LA, it's gone too." I couldn't help but grin, a subtle grin that comes from anticipating something 3 steps ahead. "The plane ticket you purchased using our shared credit card, did you use the same card to book the hotel?" Still confused and unaware of the trap I had prepared, he nodded. "You might want to check with the credit card company." I replied, my voice seeming casually suggestive, as if I were recommending a new pastry to him. "Those charges were reported to me as false. Someone has blocked them." "I also had you removed as an authorized user," he said, his jaw clenching like a fish out of water as his eyes widened in amazement and terror. "Who are you?" His speech was shaky, and he clutched the table edge as he mumbled. My voice was loud and unwavering as I rose up, retrieving my purse and a tiny overnight bag that Avery and I had prepared. "You have until tomorrow evening to get your things out," I declared. "Subsequently, the locks will be replaced." With a scream that had not been heard in years, Ethan yelled after me as I made my way to the door. His voice was frantic and pleading. "Any news on Avery? How does this make her feel? Have you considered that? Please consider our daughter." I froze, my palm resting on the doorknob, my suppressed wrath bubbling up to the surface. After months of hiding it, "Ethan, you have no right to make our daughter an excuse." I drove across town to Nora's house near Portland State University, where she worked as a freelance graphic designer, and stepped outside to feel the cool rain on my skin. Nora wasn't involved in our plans when you were drinking wine with Sadie in San Francisco. As the rain fell, the city lights glistened and the distant silhouette of Mount Hood offered a reassuring sign of stability despite the mayhem. A pot of chamomile tea simmered gently as Nora embraced me fiercely as I entered her home. Her arms were a sanctuary after the storm, and her living room was a warm and inviting retreat with sketch pads strewn across the coffee table. She drew me inside and said, "I just got off the phone with Avery's teacher." Her voice was heavy with worry, and she looked into my eyes. "Ethan allegedly tried to pick her up early, saying he was taking her to LA. I went into shock, my pulse pounding, and a shiver running down my spine. Nevertheless, Nora's steadying handshake helped me to compose myself. "Rest assured, I advised the school against releasing her. Her instructor will keep her safe until you arrive." I sighed, my shoulders relaxing a little as my thankfulness overflowed. "Thank you," I murmured, trailing behind her to the sofa, where I sank into the cushions and felt the warmth of the tea mug she had given me radiate through my hands. In spite of the trembling in her voice, Nora poured herself another cup of tea and added, "I can't believe Ethan tried that." Her eyes were black with rage. At Avery's class party, no less in the midst of her last day. He's completely out of his mind. I sipped from my chamomile tea, which was a welcome relief from the chilly evening air and the rain that was tapping softly at the window. I put the cup down and stated it was meant to catch me off guard. The steam curled gently in the air as I did so. A public exit so I wouldn't be able to resist. Nora's expression hardened, her mouth barely parted, and her fingers clenched around her coffee cup. The main guy role has always been my brother's favorite. The windows were fogged with rain outside as we sat in her warm living room, surrounded by her art prints and half-finished sketches. But it's beyond my wildest dreams. In sharp contrast to the anarchy that Ethan had wrought into my life, Nora had always been an independent thinker and doer. Having the courage to stand firm and write her own narrative was something I had admired in her for a long time. What was it about the package that made him jump? Her eyes gleamed with fascination as she inquired, her interest piercing through the silence. As I looked into her eyes, a little grin played on my lips as I sipped my tea once again. I stated, the divorce filing maintaining a calm voice and a subtle sense of victory in my words. Evidence of his fiscal misbehavior. And the prenup that will leave him with nothing. Nora exclaimed, her jaw dropping as she gulped down the news. So the prenup, I recall how fixated he was on it. His fear of losing the sales bonus his dad had just handed him was palpable. Oh, the irony, it's practically flawless. The sound of my phone's ring broke the silence as my attorney Henry Caldwell's name appeared on the screen. Before responding, I steadied myself by taking a long breath. He said, Lily, with an air of professionalism and serenity that was an anchor in the midst of the storm. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The urgent petition was granted approval. As a matter of course, the divorce processes will unfreeze the joint accounts. A sense of calm victory washed over me, and I let out a breath I hadn't known I'd been holding. Ethan's access to finances is now limited. He has just enough to cover basic bills, but not enough to buy the apartment he had his eye on in Los Angeles. I said a soft, "Thank you, Henry," as a smile drew near my mouth. Has served him yet a uncommon breach in Henry's normally professional demeanor was the touch of humor in his tone. We followed him all the way to the airport, but we haven't caught up with him yet. His Los Angeles hotel reservation apparently fell through, leaving him and Sadie stranded, was also canceled. A smile formed over my face as the warmth of the tea enveloped me. A sense of peaceful joy washed over me as I realized that Ethan's plans were falling apart like a badly made cake. Good, I said, maintaining a steady voice, with a hint of mischief in my tone. Give him some time to stew. I hung up and turned to Nora, who matched my grin and cocked an eyebrow. Drama at the airport. She tapped the cup with her fingers and inquired with a mischievous twinkle in her eye. I gave a little nod, and for the first time in months, a light, liberating giggle escaped me. In the near future, he will discover the consequences of disregarding a baker who possesses mastery over more than simply a recipe. I gave a little nod, and for the first time in months, a light, liberating giggle escaped me. He's about to find out the hard way what happens when you don't take a baker seriously. They're good with more than just recipes. I stole a quick glance at Nora, who mirrored my playful grin. But the light-heartedness quickly disappeared as I considered Avery, who was probably waiting at school, her class party coming to an end, oblivious to the mayhem her father had wrought. "I have to go get Avery," I said as I laid down my mug, the comforting heat of the tea still clinging to my fingers like a calm anchor through the tempest. She ought to hear the truth from me. Nora gave me a firm touch on the arm, her voice solid and kind. A support system I didn't know I needed. "I'm confident in you, Lily." With a grateful expression on my face, I braved the rainy Portland streets on my way to Avery's school, where the Willamette River glistened like a ribbon in the distance. The city was a kaleidoscope of green and gray as I drove. Thursday morning's preliminary hearing was held at the Multnomah County Courtroom, among a dense fog with the aroma of wet pavement and coffee wafting through the air. It was a heavy and cleansing Portland morning. Henry, my attorney, and I arrived, but Ethan, whose plan was falling apart, brought a last-minute lawyer from a practice that dealt with small business issues, not family law. With her spectacles resting on the bridge of her nose and her pen tapping gently on the desk, the judge, a lady with a keen vision and a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed the prenup with deliberate precision. She stated, "This document appears to be in order," with a clear and commanding voice that pierced through the courtroom noise. "Do you disagree with its veracity?" Nervous and dressed in a worn suit, Ethan's lawyer cleared his throat as his tie swung slightly out of place. "Your Honor, we believe the agreement is outdated due to the passage of time." The judge read aloud, taking care to correct her spectacles, her tone unwavering. "All legal actions stemming from the marriage's dissolution are included in the length as stated in Section 19. There is no expiration indicated," Ethan whispered hurriedly. To his lawyer, who appeared more and more anxious, perspiration beads forming on his forehead, the judge continued, her eyes darting across the documents. "The evidence of systematic fund transfers violates the financial transparency requirements in Section 25. With a penetrating glare, she glanced up and fell on Ethan. "Until complete financial disclosure occurs, I am deciding to keep the joint account freeze in place. Mr. Monroe will still have access to his personal account. The prenup's adultery provision states that the family residence shall be kept by Mrs. Monroe during the proceedings." With his hands clenching the table and his knuckles turning white, Ethan's face took on a deep shade of red. His voice betrayed a combination of rebellion and despair as he said, "This is insane," audible to me from across the courtroom. Her voice sliced through the room as the judge gave him a severe look. "Excuse me, please take the time to read the terms and conditions of the agreement you signed, Monroe." As we stepped out of the courthouse, Ethan ran up to me in the corridor, his legs rapid and his voice low with an air of desperation. 30 days later, after discovery is finished, the whole hearing will take place. Please, Lily, we should approach this conversation with maturity. I paused, turned to face him, and maintained a composed yet determined attitude, drawing strength from the ruins of his treachery. Our 14 years of being together must have meant something. It has immense significance. I strode out of the courtroom, leaving him alone in the corridor, the inexorable weight of his decisions weighing down on him like the heavy, unforgiving Portland fog outside. Like wildfire murmurs and speculations in a city like Portland, where everyone knows someone, word traveled rapidly across our social circle. Every day friends would call some to provide encouragement, their voices filled with worry, and others to snag juicy tidbits to tell at the next yoga class or book club. Responding with the practiced decorum I'd developed over the years, I kept my answers brief and my voice calm. "Ethan and I have decided to part ways." Meanwhile, Ethan's meticulously constructed persona successful salesperson dedicated father crumbled like a stale scone. I understand your worry, but I'd rather concentrate on progressing. Because of the budget cut, he was unable to fulfill his commitments to Sadie. The man who had believed he had won felt bitter irony when the Los Angeles apartment sale went through and the deposit was forfeited. In a professional and clipped tone, the dealership called to confirm the cancellation of the new SUV he had rented. After the hearing had passed for 2 weeks, Nora gave me a call, her voice quivering with laughter as she filled me in on the newest developments. Oh my goodness! With flour on my hands and a faint smile tugging at my lips, I placed my rolling pin on the bakery counter as Sadie went on. Is it finished? Even though I wasn't expected, the speed was mind-blowing. To Nora's amused surprise, Ethan's employer is about to lay off employees. Apparently she found out about it, Nora remarked. He boasted about big savings, but now they're all gone. I shook my head, the aroma of freshly made dough filling the air, and chuckled as I heard her tell her friend Grace that she wouldn't date a man who couldn't afford a house of his own. The sound was light and liberated, and I felt a warmth radiate through me. As Ethan's universe shrank, mine grew steadily and unstoppably, like yeast in warm bread. Ethan had no idea of the savings I had stashed away in my own accounts, but those accounts had provided me with a freedom he hadn't bargained for and a solid base upon which to grow. I rented a little office in Portland's Northwest District. It was a sleek, contemporary building with exposed brick walls and big windows that looked out over the Willamette River, which glistened under the dismal sky. To assist other women-led companies in achieving the same level of success that I had, I established Monroe Accounting Solutions, a consulting service that specializes in financial transparency and development. A florist re-establishing her business following bankruptcy, a yoga studio owner processing a divorce, and a graphic designer beginning her first solo venture were my initial clients. Their experiences mirrored mine in ways that were at once harrowing and liberating. The entrepreneurial community in Portland spread the word fast, which resulted in an influx of clients who were all resilient in their own ways. With the same pinpoint accuracy I'd used to expose Ethan's deceit, I assisted women with their financial matters throughout new endeavors, divorces, and fresh starts. The task gave my life meaning. Every accomplishment was a minor triumph that served as a constant reminder that I was constructing something substantial from the ruins of my history. In addition, I extended Sweet Bloom by launching a second site next to Powell's Books. The aroma of freshly baked pastries mixed with that of ancient books attracted both residents and visitors. As we worked together, Avery's laughter resounded throughout the room, and her firm hands helped me wire the fairy lights for the grand opening. As I was driving home from the bakery one evening, with the city lights reflecting, off the wet streets she murmured, "I'm proud of you, Mom." Her voice cracked over the phone. "You are doing more than simply surviving Dad's actions." I felt a comforting warmth in my chest as she said, "You're thriving." Her words meant more to me than any legal win could have. I'm simply trying to make amends for something that someone should have done for me earlier. I responded, my voice kind and a pout tempting, assisting women in overcoming adversity. Having my knowledge and skills recognized for more than just my baking was like creating a fresh dough, one that was uniquely mine. Ethan, a young salesperson with a crooked smile, ordered a lemon cupcake and asked for my number the day before, the final divorce court which took place on a bright autumn day. At last, a 14-year chapter had come to an end. the man who had captivated me with coffee dates. Ethan now appeared weary and exhausted as he arrived at the courthouse with a rumpled suit and dark eyes. A quiet justice that I hadn't sought but embraced was served, when I subsequently found that his employment had been eliminated as a result of corporate downsizing following the uproar surrounding his romance with Sadie. By this point, Sadie had moved on from Ethan and was enjoying a carefree life in Seattle with an older lover. Her social media profiles were replete with images of coffee runs and indie concerts. Their invites to game evenings and barbecues subtly faded as they distanced themselves from him when the complete story came out. Their allegiance shifted in the aftermath of his treachery. In a quick and definitive verdict, the judge upheld the prenup in its entirety, and the sound of her voice resounded across the courtroom as if struck by a gavel. Ethan packed up his possessions, drove away his still-debt automobile, and drew what little money he had from his private account, just enough to pay for a tiny apartment in an undesirable area of Portland. Following the prenup's provisions for adultery, I was able to keep our Laurelhurst house, my retirement funds, and 70% of our joint assets. Justice was like a freshly made loaf of bread, warm and comfortable, with an air of inescapable perfection, exactly as I'd hoped it would be. Even though Ethan had insisted on the paper as a means of self-defense, it ended up becoming his downfall. On our way out of the courthouse, Ethan came up to me for the final time. He was a little unsteady on his feet, his voice low, and I could see a little of the guy I had loved before in his eyes. While looking into my eyes, he said, "I made a terrible mistake." I could feel his want for forgiveness, or even just a hint of the kindness we had enjoyed in the past. I abruptly ended his sentence, my tone calm but determined like the gentle slamming of a door or the last chord of a song. Oh no. The weight of his decisions was visible on his face as he nodded, his shoulders drooping and an air of silent acceptance hanging over him. His voice hardly rose above a whisper as he said, "I get it." And for a change, I actually thought he did. "Wishing you all the best, Lily. You deserve it." It was a little gesture in the midst of our broken history, and it was perhaps the only honest thing he had spoken to me in years. I gave him a little nod before turning and walking away, leaving the courthouse stairs booming with my boots and feeling the clear, crisp air of Portland on my skin. Proof that the women I'd assisted were strong is that 6 months later, Monroe Accounting Solutions had outgrown its first location. My new office is more spacious and has skylights and a balcony, so now I can work in the mornings while sipping my coffee and watching the streetcars go through the Northwest District. The city is coming to life below me, together a community of strong women who have weathered their own storms, was born out of my partnership with 2 associates who were equally committed to uplifting others. Every one of my customers, from young moms on their own to longtime company owners going through tough times, had a tale of perseverance and grace. There were now 3 Sweet Bloom stores throughout Portland, and the flagship site was a popular hangout for residents and visitors alike on gloomy nights, because to the fairy lights that illuminated the space, with her self-assurance growing like a flower in Washington Park, Avery is now excelling academically. On weekends, she lends a hand in the bakery, and her infectious laughter fills the air. You realize what's amusing as we rolled the dough for tomorrow's scones. Together one day, with flour covering her cheeks, she murmured, "Dad was hoping to win, but he's now staying with Grandma." I said, nodding, as I sipped my cappuccino and looked out the window at the cityscape, which was a tapestry of greens and grays. My voice was gentle and contemplative as I said, "Sometimes people can't see the recipe for their own downfall." I mustered a subtle sense of pride in my remarks. A new identity shaped in the ashes of treachery had been constructed by the woman who had previously identified herself as Ethan's wife and Avery's mother, master baker, keeping financial records, strong supporter. The receipt that had shattered my life and been discovered in Ethan's pocket wasn't only proof of his dishonesty. I sprang to life when I encountered yeast. It was the catalyst that sent me on a path I had never imagined. Not only did I discover justice behind everything, but I also encountered a side of myself I had never encountered before. The one who turned my suffering into purpose and created a future that was sweeter than my previous experiences. I realized I'd acquired something far more sweet than retribution as I stood in the flagship Sweet Bloom on a typical Portland morning, listening to the calm buzz of delighted customers and seeing the rain paint patterns on the glass. I'd accomplished my goal. The most beautiful justice isn't always about exacting revenge. Sometimes it's about picking yourself up from the floor, letting the rain wash away the past, and baking a fresh start.